The mouth is the first step of the digestive process. When the smell of food is present, the salivary glands start secreting saliva, which contains the enzyme amylase that breaks down sugars. This is the beginning of the alimentary canal, which the process of ingesting nutrients go through. It spans from the mouth to the rectum. Once you begin chewing, you begin the mechanical process of digestion. Your saliva is part of the chemical process since it contains enzymes to aid in digestion. The pharynx or the throat is a portion of the digestive tract that receives the food from your mouth. Branching off the pharynx is the esophagus, which carries food to the stomach, and the trachea, which carries air to the lungs. This is separated by the epiglottis, which is a flap of cartilage that allows it to go down the right pipe. When the act of swallowing occurs, it depresses the epiglottis, which then covers and protects the windpipe from liquids and food particles. After food has passed through the pharynx, it goes to the esophagus, which is a muscular tube extending down behind the trachea to the stomach. Food is pushed through the esophagus and into the stomach by means of a series of contractions called peristalsis. Just before the opening of the stomach is an important ring-shaped muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter, or LES. This sphincter opens to let food pass into the stomach and closes to keep food and stomach acid, in this case hydrochloric acid, and an enzyme called pepsin. This enzyme helps break down protein inside the mucus-lined stomach. Mucus is present in the stomach walls because it allows the acid to be present. If the mucus wasn't present, your stomach acid would eat away at your stomach and you would get ulcers. If your LES doesn't work properly, you may suffer from a condition called GERD, or reflux, which causes heartburn, regurgitation, the feeling of food coming back up. Now, the stomach secretes acid and powerful enzymes that continue to process and break the food down and changing it into a consistency of a liquid or paste called chyme. From there, the food moves into the small intestine. But let's pause and go to the liver for a moment. Now, the liver has multiple functions. It's not just what keeps sharks buoyant in the ocean. In humans, it has two of its main functions, with the digestive system anyways, are to make and secrete important substances called bile, and to process the blood coming from the small intestine containing nutrients just absorbed. The liver purifies this blood and many impurities before the blood travels to the rest of the body. Now, this bile that I mentioned is something that it helps food process. It helps absorbs fat in the diet and carry, waste from the liver that, can't go to the kidneys. Now on to the gallbladder. The gallbladder is a storage sac for excess bile. Bile made in the liver travels to the small intestine via the bile ducts. If the intestine doesn't need it, the bile travels into the gallbladder, where it awaits the signal from the intestines that food is present and that the bile needs to be present in the intestine to help break down food. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but the bile serves two main purposes. It helps absorb fats in the diet, and secondly, it carries waste from the liver that cannot go through the kidneys. Now, our diet has a really bad habit of going from high fats to no fats, high fats, low fats, high fats, low fats. Well, this gets, bile stones or gallbladder stones. It is very, very painful, and it essentially means that your gallbladder has to be removed. People who have their gallbladder removed tend to have diarrhea, and it's just all sorts of bad. Take care of your gallbladder. It's good for you. Now, there's a little thing tucked behind the stomach, and it's called the pancreas. Among other functions, the pancreas is the chief factory for digestive enzymes that are secreted into the duodenum, which is the first segment of the small intestine, but we'll get to that later. These enzymes break down proteins, fats, carbohydrates, but not only, as you know, the pancreas is also key for absorbing and maintaining sugar levels in the body, aka insulin. Now, since we're done with the pancreas, we can move on to the small intestine. This is your chief of all chiefs of digestion. This is where all the absorption of the nutrients, well, not all of it, the majority of the nutrients absorbed. And between meals, the chyme mixture is released from the stomach by the pyloric sphincter and is ushered through the rest of the intestine to be eliminated or excreted. Fed by the mesentery, the small intestine, made up of 3 segments: the duodenum, which is the first part, the jejunum, which is the second part, and the ileum, which is the third part, closest to the colon or the large intestine. The small intestine also breaks down food using enzymes released by the pancreas and bile from the liver. Don't forget our little gallbladder friend, he holds on to bile for us. Take care of the gallbladder. The small intestine is the workhorse of digestion, as this is where most nutrients are absorbed by the excess strands coming out, called villi. Villi are mainly located along the walls in the intestines. In fact, that's the only place they're located, and they are there to absorb nutrients. Peristalsis is also at work in this organ, moving food through and mixing it up with the digestive secretions from the pancreas and liver, including bile. Don't forget our little gallbladder friend. The duodenum is largely responsible. Remember, the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. The duodenum is largely responsible for continuing breakdown process. The jejunum and ileum are mainly responsible for absorption of nutrients into the bloodstream. Nonetheless important. A more technical name for this process is called motility, because it involves moving or emptying food particles from one part to the next. This process is highly dependent on the activity of a large network of nerves, hormones, muscles. Problems with any of these components can cause a variety of conditions. Even constipation. It can cause bleeding, lacerations. It's bad. Now we get onto our little panic attack of E. coli. E. coli is a bacteria that lives in the intestines and are relatively harmless to us, and well, with the exception of a few strands that could make us very ill, give us food poisoning, possibly could kill infants if it was a really nasty strand. And just as a little side note, P.S., everything above the large intestine is the upper GI tract, and everything below everything below is the lower GI tract. Just as a little heads up when the doctors start using weird words on you. That brings us to the large intestine and or the colon. The large intestine, aka the colon, is a 5 to 7 foot long muscular tube that connects the small intestine to the rectum. That's your anus. Is made up of the cecum, or the cecum, however you pronounce it, and the ascending right colon, the transverse colon, the ascending colon, the sigmoid colon, which connects to the rectum. By the way, our little appendix friend that we really don't know what it's for is a small tube attached to the ascending colon. There's a lot of theories about the appendix, but no one really knows. The large intestine is a highly specialized organ that is responsible for processing waste, or feces, or fecal matter, or stool, or poop, whatever you want to call it. So that defecation, excretion of waste, is easy and convenient, unless you're constipated. That would be bad. Stool, feces, fecal matter, waste, poop, left over from the digestive process, passes through the colon by means of peristalsis, first in liquid state, and then ultimately in solid form. As stool passes through the colon, any remaining water is absorbed. Fecal matter is stored in the sigmoid, or the S-shaped colon, until a mass movement empties into the rectum, usually once or twice a day. On the plus side, it normally takes about 36 hours for stool to get through the colon. The stool itself is mostly food debris and bacteria. These bacteria perform several useful functions, such as synthesizing various vitamins, processing waste products and food products, and protecting against harmful bacteria. Luckily, our little bacteria in our body are our friends, and luckily that, food you ate 2 days of your body are still being processed. Keep that in mind. That's right, you had McDonald's 2 days ago, still in you. Ha! Don't eat McDonald's, it's bad for you. The rectum is an 8-inch chamber that connects to the colon and to the anus. The rectum receives stool from the colon, lets the person know that there is feces to be evacuated, and holds stool until evacuation happens. The brain then decides if the rectal contents can be released or not. If they can, the sphincter relaxes and the rectum contracts, expelling the feces. If the contents cannot be expelled, the sphincters contract and the rectum accommodates so that the sensation temporarily goes away. You never know how well that works out, though. Now, the anus, the rectum, the poop chute, is the last part of the digestive tract. It consists of the muscle that line the pelvis, pelvic floor muscles, and 2 muscles called the anal sphincters, internal and external, and that is your lovely tour through the alimentary canal.